The glass doors of Sterling Gate Bank slid apart with a soft sigh and let in the smell of rain with Jack Miller. Cold drops still clung to his worn jacket. His jeans were damp around the cuffs from the puddles on 4th Avenue. On his shoulder, his daughter was a small, warm weight, her cheek pressed against the side of his neck, her breath slow and even. One of Mia's socks had slipped halfway off. He had not noticed until the woman in the charcoal suit frowned at the sight and then quickly looked away. Inside, the air was cool and dry, touched with the faint bitterness of fresh coffee and the sterile tang of cleaning chemicals. Light flooded in through 2 stories of glass bouncing off marble floors and chrome railings. Screens glowed behind sleek counters. A chandelier made of looping glass hung overhead, catching the morning gray and breaking it into soft fragments. Jack stopped just inside the entrance. For a second, he simply stood there, letting the doors whisper shut behind him. People moved around him with purpose shoes clicking against stone, their voices low and sure. A man in a navy suit glanced at his watch. A woman in a beige coat laughed quietly into her phone. No one looked at Jack for more than a heartbeat. He shifted Mia higher on his shoulder. Her hair smelled like cheap baby shampoo and sleep. Her stuffed bear, missing one eye and half an ear, dangled from her hand and almost brushed the floor. His gaze dropped to the polished marble beneath his boots. The floor was so clean it held a faint mirror of him. A tall, tired man, jaw dark with stubble hair in need of a cut, shoulders rounded inward, as if he expected a blow. On that shimmering surface, his old work boots looked wrong among the sharp Oxfords and glossy heels. His right hand was buried deep in the pocket of his jacket. His fingers had been curled around the edge of a plastic card since he stepped off the bus, feeling the small ridges of the worn numbers. He squeezed it now so hard the skin around his knuckles went pale. The card felt heavier than it should, as if the weight of the last few months had settled inside it. Under the bright lobby lights last night, came back in sharp fluorescent pieces. He had come up the building's stairwell in the dark, breathing hard from the last 3 flights. The motion sensor light at his floor had flickered and then held humming faintly. The hallway smelled like boiled cabbage and old carpet. Someone down the hall had their TV turned up too loud, a game show host shouting behind thin walls. The envelope had been the first thing he saw. It was taped to his apartment door, a strip of cheap clear tape pressed crookedly over the top. Bright red paper, the kind no one used for anything good. He remembered the way his stomach had tightened before he even pulled it free. Jack had ripped the tape with his thumb, unfolded the notice, and watched the words blur for a second before they snapped into focus. Past due, amount owed $2,950. Pay within 5 days or vacate premises. The paper trembled a little in his hand. He did not realize he was shaking until a small voice behind him asked, "Dad, what is it?" Mia had been standing in the doorway, clutching her bear by its one good ear, her hair sticking up in soft clumps from sleep. She wore pajamas with tiny stars on them, one knee poking through a worn patch. He had turned halfway, folding the notice so fast the edges cut his finger. "Just mail," he had said. It had come out too quickly. "Nothing important, kiddo. Go sit at the table. I will get you some cereal." Her eyes had lingered on the bright red paper for a second. Then she had nodded, bare feet pattering down the short hallway toward the kitchen. Inside, the apartment had felt smaller than usual. The overhead light in the kitchen buzzed faintly, making a circle on the peeling linoleum. The refrigerator made a tired sound in the corner, working harder than it should. Jack opened it and stared inside. Half a gallon of Milk Light when he lifted it. 2 eggs in a carton meant to hold 12. A jar of peanut butter with the sides scraped thin. A heel of bread in a plastic bag. He poured the last of the milk over a small bowl of cereal, watching it barely cover the flakes. There was just enough to splash into Mia's cup. The hollow glug of the carton made his teeth clench. He took the bowl and cup to the table. Mia climbed onto her chair legs, dangling spoon already in her hand. She ate without complaint, each bite slow, careful, as if she sensed something off in the air. "Did you eat at work?" she had asked, mouth half full. "Yeah," he lied. "Big sandwich. You would have hated it." She had smiled a little at that and gone back to counting the stars on her pajamas. When she finished, when the bowl was mostly bare except for a few soggy flakes, he sent her to brush her teeth and turned back to the notice. The red seemed even brighter under the kitchen light. 5 days. Less, really. Landlords read from calendars, not from broken people. He had carried his wallet to the table and opened it like someone opening a verdict. $37 in small bills. 3 ones folded around a 10 of 20 that had felt like a lifeline at the beginning of the week. A receipt from the dollar store. A faded photo of Emily with Mia as a baby in her arms. He had stared at the picture until his throat burned. Behind the photo, something else had been tucked into the leather, a small white envelope creased at the corners. It had his name written on it in a looping hand he knew better than his own. For Jack, he had forgotten how long it had been there. Some days blurred around the hospital beep, the hushed voices, the smell of antiseptic. He had opened it with careful fingers as if it might fall apart. Inside there was a single card, Sterling Gate Bank, silver letters dulled by time, the plastic scratched along the edges. No note, no explanation, just the card and his name on the envelope written by a hand that no longer existed in the world. His thumb had traced the raised numbers, the tiny expiration date. From the hospital, something else rose up. Emily's face pale against the flat white of the pillow, the oxygen tube at her nose, the freckles that had never quite faded even when the rest of her had. Her hand had been thin and cool in his, but the grip had surprised him that day. "Keep this close," she had whispered, pushing something small into his palm. Her voice had been rough from medication, from weeks of talking too little and hurting too much. "Promise me, Jack." He had looked down, seen the flash of plastic, before he closed his hand around it. What is it?" he had asked. His eyes had burned, and he had not wanted to waste a second on anything that was not her face. "If it is about bills, we will figure it out." She had shaken her head weakly. "Just keep it," she had said. "Breath for me, okay, one thing at a time." He had laughed then, a broken sound that had not sounded like laughter at all. "Breathe," he had repeated. "You and your yoga podcasts." The monitor had beeped steadily. Somewhere in the hall, a cart had rattled past. She had closed her eyes. The conversation had ended. Nurses had come and gone. He had never asked again. Back in the cramped kitchen with the eviction notice on the table and his daughter humming to herself in the bathroom, Jack had turned the card over and over in his fingers. Maybe it was empty. Maybe it was nothing but an old account Emily had forgotten to close. Maybe it held $50, maybe less. He had stared at the red notice again. Nothing had changed until he had said the words out loud so softly that no one but the humming refrigerator could hear. "I will go," he had murmured. "Tomorrow. I will take it in and ask." He had slid the card back into his wallet behind the photo of Emily, as if tucking it into her hand. He had cleared the table, set the notice aside, and sat in the dark a little longer, listening to the sound of water in the pipes and Mia singing tunelessly to her toothbrush. Now, under the high ceiling of Sterling Gate Bank, that same card pressed against his palm through the faded lining of his jacket. Jack drew in a breath that tasted of air conditioning, and coffee adjusted his hold on Mia and stepped away from the door toward the long row of counters where people waited with their polished shoes and their questions about money. The line at the counters moved in quiet, efficient bursts. People stepped forward when called, held out checkbooks, and phones spoke in soft, practiced voices about transfers and wire dates and limits. Jack hovered at the end of the row, unsure if he was supposed to wait or walk up. A woman in a burgundy blazer caught his eye and pointed to an open spot with a practiced smile. It was not unfriendly, not warm either, just a signal. Move. Next. He shifted Mia in his arms and walked toward the station where a young woman sat behind a monitor. Her dark hair was twisted into a loose bun, a few strands escaping around her face. A small nameplate near her keyboard read, "Carmen Lopez." She looked up as he approached, and something in her expression changed. The neutral mask slipped for a second. Her eyes flicked from his damp jacket to the child against his shoulder, then to the stuffed bear dragging from Mia's hand. Whatever she thought, it did not reach her mouth. "Good morning," she said. Her voice had a warm, husky edge, like someone who laughed a lot when she was not at work. "How can I help you today?" Jack cleared his throat. His voice came out rough. I need to check a balance." He pulled his right hand from his pocket, the card between his fingers. The plastic looked dull in the bright light. He set it on the counter carefully, as if it might crack. "On this." Carmen drew it closer with a light touch, the way nurses touch needles in glass vials. She glanced at the front, then turned it over. "Sterling Gate debit," she said. "Okay. Do you have a photo ID, Mr. Miller?" he said. "Jack Miller." He nodded toward his jacket pocket. "License is in there. I can grab it, He shifted Mia again in explanation. She had gone boneless and sleep heavy now, in the way only children could manage. Carmen smiled, the corners of her eyes softening. "You are fine," she said. "Let me see what the system says first." She slipped the SID card through her reader with a practiced motion. The device beeped lightly. She turned back to her screen and began to type. Jack watched her fingers hovering above the keyboard nails, short and neat. The smile faded. She frowned slightly, hit a few more keys. The screen reflected faintly in her glasses. He could see lines of text blocks of color, none of it clear enough to understand. Everything okay? He asked. Just a moment, she said. The frown deepened. She tried again slower. Then she stopped, leaning back a fraction. That is odd. His stomach tightened. Is there a problem with the card? He heard the thinness in his own voice. Carmen shook her head, but her eyes stayed on the screen. It is not declined, she said. It is just not going through the regular system. She picked up the card again, checked some tiny number on the back. This is flagged for internal routing. I do not know what that means. It means it is linked to a different platform. She looked up at him now, reassuring. Sometimes old accounts or special accounts are on internal systems. I cannot access it from here. It needs private banking. Her words might as well have been in another language. I only need to see the balance, he said. I do not need anything fancy. I know. She gave him a quick apologetic smile. This is not about fancy. It is about software. They do not let us break the rules. She glanced at the card again, then back at him. Can you wait a minute? Let me get someone from upstairs. Upstairs, he repeated as if that explained anything. That is where they keep the people with the good coffee? She said, a hint of humor slipping through. And the other systems? She rose from her chair, card in hand. Just stay right here, okay? You and your sleepy assistant. Mia shifted at that moment, making a small sound against his neck. Jack brushed her hair away from her face. We can stand, he said. We are not going anywhere. Carmen nodded once and disappeared through a side door that had a small sign reading Employees Only. For a few seconds, the noise of the lobby pressed in on him again. The low murmur of conversations, the steady ping of the ticket number, display the hummed rhythm of printers and scanners. A child laughed somewhere behind him, higher and brighter than everything else, then was shushed quickly. Jack turned his head and looked out through the glass wall. The street outside was a sheet of wet pavement, headlights sliding past in loose streaks. He could see his reflection faintly overlaid on the scene like a ghost in someone else's life. His arm throbbed under Mia's weight. He did not mind. The warmth of her was the only thing that felt uncomplicated. He thought of the bus ride over, the way she had pressed her face to the fogged window and traced shapes with a fingertip until she fell asleep. The driver had nodded at him when he had boarded, eyes flicking to the little girl on his shoulder, then to the rain clinging to his clothes. You got it? The man had asked, a quick check, not intrusive. Yeah, Jack had said, more hope than truth. Now the same question floated up in his head, only it was his own voice speaking to no one. You got it. He did not answer. The door beside Carmen's station opened again. She stepped out with another woman at her side. This woman moved with compact precision, each step set down with purpose. Her blazer was cut sharper than Carmen's, the black fabric catching light along its seams. Her hair, a clear dark blonde, was pulled back into a low ponytail that did not have a single strand out of place. She carried the bank card between two fingers, as if it were a file in a stack she had already read and judged. She looked at Jack the way some people looked at a car parked in the wrong spot. Not hostile exactly, measuring, calculating where he did and did not fit. Mr. Miller, she asked. Yes, he said. The word stuck a little in his throat. I am Allison Blake, she said. Private banking. She held up the card. I understand you are trying to access this account. He nodded. It was my wife's, he said. She gave it to me before she passed. The words were always heavier on his tongue than he expected. I just want to see what is on it. Something flickered across Allison's face. Not quite sympathy, not quite impatience. Her eyes dropped to Mia for a second, took in the small sock slipping off the worn bear, then came back up. Our retail systems are not allowed to show balances on internal accounts, she said. It is a security thing. If you do not mind coming with me, I can access it from upstairs. Upstairs, he repeated again. A corner of her mouth twitched, but the rest of her stayed composed. It will be more private, she said. Carmen, standing a little behind Allison, gave Jack a small, encouraging nod. I will keep your place in line, Carmen said quietly. Just in case. Jack managed a tight smile. Okay, he said. We will follow. He shifted Mia, carefully sliding one arm fully under her legs. Her head lolled against his chest, now mouth slightly open. She smelled like cereal and the grape toothpaste she liked too much. Allison held the card like a key and led the way across the lobby. They passed rows of chairs where people sat with tablets and phones, the glow of screens painting their faces in cold light. A television on the far wall ran a muted news segment with crawl text about markets and interest rates. Near the back of the lobby, a set of frosted glass doors waited, the Sterling Gate logo etched into their surface. Allison tapped her badge against a small black square beside the handle. A light blinked green. The lock clicked. She pulled one door open and stepped aside to let Jack go first. The air beyond the glass felt different, quieter, cooler. The lighting was softer, the colors warmer. Dark wood paneling replaced white walls. The floor shifted from marble to thick carpet that muted footsteps. The sounds of the main lobby faded muffled to a distant hum. They passed a row of low-leather chairs where a man in a pinstriped suit sat speaking into an earpiece, voice low. Across from him, a woman in a pale blouse flipped through glossy pages of what looked like an investment brochure. Both glanced up as Jack went by, their eyes landing on Mia and then on his boots. Neither spoke. The card in Allison's hand caught the light as she turned it over once, almost idly. Just ahead, she said, "We have a small room we can use." Jack nodded, throat tight. He adjusted his grip on Mia, feeling her weight against his ribs, and followed Allison deeper into the quiet heart of the bank. The room Allison chose was not large, but it felt expensive in the way some hotel lobbies did. Dark wood table, 2 leather chairs on one side, a single chair on the other. A framed photograph of the Seattle skyline at night hung on the wall, the lights reflected in the water, like a second city turned upside down. Allison pushed the door open with her shoulder and gestured inside. "Have a seat, Mr. Miller." Jack stepped in carefully, afraid his boots might leave tracks on the pale carpet. He eased himself into the single chair, then shifted so Mia could rest across his lap rather than hanging off his shoulder. She made a small noise and nestled closer, her cheek pressing into his chest. The table between them held a computer monitor, a thin keyboard, and a small black terminal with a slot for cards. Everything was clean, no personal items, no coffee cup, just work. Allison sat opposite him, the card still in her hand. Up close, her eyes were a cool gray lashes, dark and straight. There were faint lines at the corners when she narrowed them, not from smiling, Jack decided, from squinting at screens. "Can I see your ID now?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "Sorry, I should have handed it over downstairs." "It is fine," she said. "Policy." He reached awkwardly into his pocket, careful not to jostle Mia too much, and pulled out his wallet. The leather was worn along the edges. He fished out his driver's license and slid it across the table. Allison glanced at it, then at the card, comparing names. She typed something into the system first, registering him into whatever category he belonged to, now that he was past the frosted doors. "Okay," she said. "I am going to access the account. I may need to ask you a few questions after I see what we are dealing with." He nodded. "All I need is the balance." Her fingers paused on the keyboard, then resumed their rhythm. "Yes," she said, "we will start there." She placed the card into the terminal. The machine chimed softly. On the screen, a login window appeared with more security prompts than he was used to. She typed in an ID that looked longer than a normal username and a string of characters that had to be a password. The system began to load. A small circle of dots spun in the corner of the display. For a moment, nothing else happened. Jack became aware of the sound of the air conditioning vent above them, of the faint whisper of the carpet as someone passed in the hall outside. His heart counted its own beats in his ears. "If this is some kind of mistake," he said quietly, "I can just leave. I am not trying to cause trouble." Allison did not take her eyes off the screen. "This is not trouble," she said. "This is my job." The circle stopped spinning. Lines of text blinked into place. Her posture changed barely. A straightening of the back, a stilling of the hands. She leaned in closer, eyes scanning the data. Jack watched her face. The tiny lines at the corner of her mouth went flat. The hand resting near the keyboard curled in slowly, as if she was resisting the urge to reach for something solid. He waited for her to say a number. 50, maybe 100. Something small. Something that fit the reality he knew. She did not speak. "Is it 0?" he asked. The word snagged his throat like a hook. "Is it overdrawn or something?" Her eyes flicked to him, then back to the screen. There was a strange blankness in them now, as if someone had wiped them clean of expression. "No," she said. The word came out softer than before. "It is not 0. She turned the monitor a fraction, just enough that he could see the box at the top in a clear, bold font. Available balance, 78,412,984. At first, his eyes refused to focus. The digits swam for a second, rearranging themselves in his mind. 78,000. That was what his brain tried to make of it. He blinked. The comma placement settled in. $78,412,980.45. The room narrowed. The skyline on the wall blurred. His pulse jumped high in his throat, a hot, fast rush that made the edges of his vision prickle. "That is not right," he said. His voice did not sound like his own. "You are missing a decimal." "The decimal is right there," Allison said. Her tone was flat now, clinical, before the 45. He gripped the edge of the table. The wood felt smooth and cold under his fingers. "It cannot be that much," he said. "That is, no. Mr. Miller, She said this figure is coming directly from our internal ledger. These systems do not guess. They record. He shook his head slowly. The motion felt delayed, as if his body and his thoughts were slightly out of sync. She was a nurse, he said. My wife. She worked nights on the pediatrics floor. We lived paycheck to paycheck. I ran freight at the port. We did not even have savings. You cannot tell me there are $78 million sitting there. I am not telling you anything, Allison answered. I am showing you the number assigned to this account. Mia shifted in his lap, her small hand flexing against his chest. He looked down, automatically checking that her head was supported, that her mouth was not pressed into his shirt in a way that would make breathing hard. Breathe, Jack. Emily's voice rose out of nowhere in his mind, unwanted and suddenly sharp. The way she had said it in the hospital when he had started to panic over a beep-beep on the monitor, and she had squeezed his fingers. He realized he had been holding his breath. He forced his lungs to pull in air, but it felt thick, as if the room had filled with something heavier than oxygen. Allison watched him silently for a few seconds, as if weighing whether he might bolt or pass out. Then she looked back at the screen and began clicking through different tabs. Sometimes large value accounts like this are restricted, she said. Tied to trusts, external managers, special conditions. I need to see the structure. Large value, he repeated almost on a laugh. It came out hollow. You think? She ignored that and kept working. The cursor flicked over lines labeled Account History, Transactions, Origin. She opened one. Columns of numbers appeared dense and orderly. Regular deposits, always from the same source, in intervals that did not match any paycheck cycle he knew. She frowned deeper. Is it stolen? Jack asked. The idea arrived suddenly. His stomach lurched. Is that what this is? Did someone put it in the wrong place? I do not want any part of that. If you need to lock it or freeze it, do it. I just need enough to... His voice cut off. He did not finish that sentence. This is not stolen, Allison said. Her hands moved faster now, navigating through layers of data. If there was any fraud marker attached, the system would have flagged it long before you walked in. Her eyes flicked to the top corner of the screen, to a small icon that did not mean anything to him, but apparently meant something to her. It is clean, she murmured. She clicked again. A new window opened. More text. Her gaze snagged on a line, then went still. What, he asked quietly, what are you seeing? She did not answer immediately. Her jaw worked once, a small tightening. I am seeing something that is above my clearance, she said at last. His throat dried. That sounds bad, he managed. It sounds like I need my boss, she replied. She reached for the phone on the table, pressed a button labeled with a simple word, office. The line barely rang once before someone picked up. Robert, she said. It is Allison in PB3. I have an internal legacy account that just populated with a high-value balance. Origin marker is the Lockwood platform. A pause. Yes, that Lockwood. I think you should take a look. Jack heard a low voice on the other end, too faint to make out words. Allison listened, eyes still on the screen, fingers resting near the keyboard, as if ready to resume the second she hung up. He is in a meeting, she said almost to herself. He will be here shortly. The phone clicked back into its cradle. Silence settled over the room again, heavier now. Jack could hear the faint whoosh of air through the vent and the quiet buzz of the monitor. Somewhere beyond the wall, a printer started, then stopped. Lockwood. He knew that name. It had slid through the news for years, attached to phrases like pharmaceutical giant and family foundation, and scandals he had not had the energy to follow. What does that have to do with my wife's card? He asked. Allison's gaze flicked to him, then back to the small line of text near the top of the window where Lockwood Children's Trust sat in neat black letters. That, she said slowly, is what I intend to find out. The door opened with a soft click. A man in his 50s stepped inside, closing it carefully behind him. He was not tall, but there was a steadiness about him that filled the space. His suit was charcoal, the kind that fit so well it almost disappeared into the background. Silver threaded through his black hair at the temples. A small pin with the Sterling Gate logo sat on his lapel. Mr. Miller, he said the words gentle, as if he already knew something of what was happening. I am Robert Chang. I oversee private banking for this branch. Jack shifted in his chair. Mia's weight had made his legs go a little numb. He straightened slowly, mindful of her head against his chest. Hi, Jack managed. Robert's gaze took in the scene. The child, the worn boots, the tired face. Then he looked at Allison. She angled the monitor toward him without being asked. We have an internal legacy account, she said. Balance in the high 8 figures. Deposits from the Lockwood Children's Trust over a 3-year period. Robert leaned in. His expression did not change much, but his eyebrows rose a fraction. He read silently for a few moments, eyes moving along the lines of text with practiced focus. 78 million, he said quietly. He did not make it a question. He clicked into another tab. Structured deposits, quarterly, then irregular, no withdrawals, no flags. He glanced at Allison, and Mr. Miller walked in off the street to check the balance. Yes, Allison said. Robert nodded more to himself than to anyone else. He straightened and turned his attention fully to Jack. Mr. Miller, you said this card belonged to your wife. Yeah, Jack said. Emily Miller. She worked at Harborview, Pediatrics. Robert's expression shifted a notch at the name of the hospital, but he kept his voice even. And you were not aware of this account. Jack let out a small sound that might have been a laugh. If I knew we had $78 million, he said I would not be behind on rent. Robert smiled at that. It was a brief, real curve of the mouth that reached his eyes for half a second before vanishing. That is fair, he said. He pulled out the chair beside Allison and sat angling himself so he could see both the screen and Jack. All right, first take a breath. The words hit Jack like a gentle teen on the shoulder from the past. Breathe. He did as he was told, dragging air into his lungs until the tight band around his chest loosened a little. Thank you, Robert said, as if Jack had done him a personal favor. Now, I am going to explain what we can see, and then we will dig into what we cannot see yet. He pointed to the top of the screen where a string of labels sat. This account was opened 3 years ago, he said. The originating client is listed as Emily Miller. The platform is tied to the Lockwood Children's Trust, which is a philanthropic arm of the Lockwood family. They fund pediatric research, among other things. The drug people, Jack said. Pharma. They are always in the news. Yes, Robert said. Them. He clicked into another window labeled Documents. Several file names appeared, long strings of letters and numbers that meant nothing at a glance. One line was tagged with a small icon and the word Trust. Robert opened it. Dense paragraphs of legal language filled the screen. He scrolled slowly, scanning as he went. Allison read over his shoulder, lips moving silently. Jack could not follow the words. They blurred into each other, all the same shape. He focused instead on the way Robert's face tightened around the eyes the further he read. Eventually, Robert stopped and sat back. This, he said, tapping the screen lightly, is a trust instrument. It states that the Lockwood Children's Trust established a monetary fund for the benefit of Emily Miller. The funds are to be held in her name, but restricted until certain conditions are met. What conditions? Jack asked. Robert looked at him, voice steady. Her death, he said. Upon confirmation of her passing, the entire balance transfers to you as the designated beneficiary, Jack Miller. There is a clause naming your daughter as contingent beneficiary if you predecease receipt, but we do not need to get into that right now. Jack's fingers had gone numb. The room seemed to tilt for a second, then right itself. So, all this, he said slowly, has just been sitting here, while she was sick, while we could not pay for things. Robert did not answer right away. He glanced at another line on the document, then back to Jack. The funds were restricted for personal use until the transfer condition was met, he said. They could be used for certain approved expenses through the trust, but only if a formal request was made. Jack thought of nights at the kitchen table, bills spread out like cards in a losing hand. He thought of Emily saying they would figure it out, that she would pick up extra shifts when she felt stronger. She never made one, he said quietly. No, Robert said. She did not. Allison's hands had stilled on the table. For the first time since he met her, there was no professional distance on her face, just a thin, focused kind of attention. Robert scrolled to the top of the document again, then down to a section marked Originating Arrangement. This is the part I needed to see, he murmured. He clicked on a small link embedded in the text. Another window opened. This one was different. No typed paragraphs. Instead, a scanned image filled the space. The quality was sharp enough that even the small imperfections in the paper showed. A form several pages long with boxes and lines of print. At the top, under the letterhead of a medical center, were the words, Adult Donor Consent, Allogeneic Bone Marrow Transplant. Jack's mouth went dry. He knew some of those words, not like this, not lined up together. Robert zoomed in. A line marked Donor Name showed Emily Miller handwritten in blue ink. The date listed was 4 years earlier, long before she had gotten sick herself. Further down there were signatures from doctors he did not know, a nurse, a witness. At the bottom, in a box set apart from the rest, was a note in all caps. Donor requests anonymity. Compensation to be managed by Lockwood Children's Trust. Beneficiary designation spouse. Jack Miller and issue. Jack stared at the blue ink that spelled his own name. He recognized the way the letters slanted, the way she always looped the J, like a question mark. He had seen that handwriting on sticky notes grocery lists, the first birthday card she ever wrote Mia. The sight of it here on a medical form attached to words like donor and compensation twisted something low in his gut. Robert zoomed further down to the signature line. Emily's name was there clear and steady. The date next to it was circled faintly in pencil from some previous review. Jack swallowed. "What is this?" he asked, even though some part of him already knew. Allison answered. Her voice had lost its cool edge. 4 years ago, she said your wife donated bone marrow. The recipient was a child registered under the Lockwood program. Ethan Lockwood. The account we are looking at is the financial arrangement that came out of that donation. Donated, Jack repeated. The word felt strange in his mouth, like for a stranger. Like for a specific child, Robert said. The Lockwood family established a program to match donors with children in need of transplants. They also established financial trusts for donors they considered essential to their program. Jack's vision blurred at the edges. The room seemed to recede, then come back into sharp focus around the glowing monitor and Emily's signature. She never told me, he said. His voice was hoarse. The words scraped coming out. He remembered a day years back when she had come home with a bandage in the crook of her elbow and a tired smile. Just gave some blood for a kid at the hospital, she had said, kissing his cheek on her way past him to the sink. No big deal. He had been half listening, half watching a game on their small TV feed up on the table, out of breath from a double shift. He remembered saying something about her being a better person than him, but he could not remember if he had even gotten up from the couch. She did this, he said now, gesturing at the screen before she got sick. Yes, Robert said. According to these dates, the donation was 4 years ago. Her illness was diagnosed 2 years after that, is that correct? Jack nodded, throat tight. And she requested anonymity, Allison added. She brought the cursor to the line again, highlighting the words without clicking. She did not want the recipients to know her name. She did not want this tied back to her publicly. And she set this thing up. Jack said, the shape of it slowly forcing itself into his understanding, so the money would go to me and to Mia after she died. Robert met his eyes. There was no pity there, only a quiet respect. That is what this document states, he said. She directed the compensation into a restricted trust, and she directed that trust to release fully upon her death in your favor. Jack reached up and cupped the back of Mia's head more to steady himself than to protect her. His chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with breathing. She never used it, he said. She went through all of that. And she never touched a cent. Allison spoke softly. She could have asked the trust to make disbursements for medical costs, she said. It is allowed. There is a provision here. She scrolled down, pointed. She did not submit a single request. Jack let his head fall back against the chair for a moment. He stared at the ceiling tile, the sprinkler head, the small crack near the light fixture. In the hospital, when things had gotten really bad, she had joked once that she was worth more as parts. He had told her to shut up. He had thought she was being dark and dramatic. He had told her he did not want to hear that. Now the joke echoed in his head, thin and brittle. He lowered his gaze again and looked at her name on the screen. Emily Miller. 2 sets of letters that had changed everything in his life once when he married her, and were somehow changing everything again from a distance he could not cross. He blinked hard. His eyes burned. I should have known, he said. The sentence broke in the middle. I lived with her. I should have known what she was doing. Mr. Miller, Robert said quietly, people keep things from the people they love for many reasons. Sometimes to protect them, sometimes to protect themselves. What matters right now is that she chose to direct this toward you and your daughter. Jack did not answer. His hand had found the card in his pocket again, rubbing the edge of the plastic through the fabric, feeling every tiny scratch as if it were a braille he had never learned to read. Across from him, Allison looked at the screen one more time, then at Jack. There was no trace left of the quick judgment from the lobby, only an awareness of the weight in the room. She did something enormous, Allison said, and she made sure you would not find out until you had to. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, just long enough to see her standing in their old kitchen hair, pulled up laughing about burning a grilled cheese. Then the image changed, replaced by the memory of her in that hospital bed, paler every day, still making space for his panic instead of her own. When he opened his eyes again, the numbers were still there. The forms were still there. Her signature was still there. Nothing about his past had shifted. Everything about his present had. The room felt crowded, though there were only 3 adults and a sleeping child. Jack dragged a hand over his face. His skin felt too hot, his jaw tight. He tried to swallow and found his throat dry. This is wrong, he said. Robert glanced at him. What part of it feels wrong to you? Jack let out a breath that broke in the middle. All of it, he said. The money, the secret, The paperwork? Her. He nodded toward the screen. She gave up bone marrow for some rich family's kid, and then she lived in our apartment eating toast for dinner. That does not make sense. Allison stayed quiet. Robert watched him steadily, not looking away. I was there, Jack went on, words spilling faster now. I watched her get thinner. I watched her work nights when she should have been resting, because we did not have enough to pay for gas. We counted coins on the kitchen table to see if we could get Mia a birthday cake. And this is just sitting there locked up behind some password, because she checked a box that says I only get it when she is gone. His voice rose on the last word. Mia shifted a small frown creasing her forehead. He stopped, immediately, held her close, rubbed her back until her face smoothed out again. I did not earn this, he said softly. The air conditioner hummed above them. Allison shifted in her seat. The leather creaked. What do you mean by that? Robert asked. Jack stared at his own hands. They looked older lately. More lines at the knuckles, more small scars from freight straps and busted pallets and cleaning jobs picked up in between hospital visits. I mean, it is her pain that got them to sign whatever those forms are, he said. Her blood, her time, her body. She is the one who lay on some table and let strangers take what they needed. She is the one who spent months feeling sick and still went to work. She is the one who sat with parents who could not stop crying while their kids were hooked up to machines. His fingers tightened around the card in his pocket until the edge dug into his skin. I was just the guy who drove her there, he said. The guy who sat in the waiting room and drank bad coffee and pretended I was not scared out of my mind. I did not do anything to be worth $78 million. He said the number like it offended him. Allison's mouth opened a fraction, then closed again. She looked at Robert, but he stayed silent, giving her space she did not seem to expect. She drew in a breath. Mr. Sturmiller, she said, this is not a prize. He looked up, eyes red. It sure feels like one, he said. One she won and never cashed in. It is not a prize, she repeated. It is a structure, a legal container for funds. Someone had to sign off on it. That is what you are seeing. But the reason behind it is not the signature. It is the person. And that person chose you. Jack let out a ragged laugh. She did not choose me for this, he said. She chose some kid she did not know. I am just the name in the box that comes after. Allison pushed her chair back and stood up. Excuse me, she said to Robert. Then she walked around the table and stopped across from Jack, close enough that she could have reached out and touched his shoulder if she wanted. She did not touch him. She crouched instead, lowering herself so that she was at eye level with him where he sat. Up close he could see that her eyes were not just gray. There were flecks of green near the pupils, almost hidden. Yes, she chose that child, Allison said. And she chose to let a portion of what came from that go into a trust. But she also chose the terms. She chose the timing. She chose the beneficiary. That is not an afterthought. Jack looked back at the screen at the cold black letters naming him. I did not even know about any of this, he said. That does not change the fact that she did, Allison said. Her voice was softer now, but there was steel under it. She knew exactly what she was doing when she put your name there. She knew what it would cost her. She knew that you did not have the language for this or the connections. She set it up anyway. Not because you returned enough shopping carts or lifted enough crates or sat in enough waiting rooms. Not because you logged a certain number of points for being a good husband. Because she loved you. And because she wanted your daughter to be safe. Her words hung between them. Jack shook his head. Love does not come with that many zeros, he said. Are you sure? She asked. He blinked. Sometimes love shows up as the person who stays, she went on. Sometimes it shows up as someone who gives away parts of themselves. Sometimes it is a trust document written in legal language that looks nothing like a wedding vow, but underneath it is the same thing. Jack swallowed. His throat felt thick. I was not enough, he said. The confession came out of some hidden place he had not looked at directly. If I had been enough, she would have told me. She would have asked me. She would have let me carry some of this with her. Allison's jaw tightened for a second. Or she said she thought you were already carrying too much. He stared at her. We see this more than you might think, she said. Not this exact scale, not this exact situation. But people buying insurance policies without telling their families, people setting up accounts that only trigger in the worst case. They do it because talking about it makes what they are afraid of too real. Or because they think if they keep it quiet, they can still pretend they will be there to watch it help. Robert shifted slightly in his chair, but he did not interrupt. You were there, Allison said. You drove her. You sat in those waiting rooms. You held your kid together when you were falling apart yourself. She did not write that down because the law does not know how to count those things. So, the money comes in under her name. but do not tell me you did not do anything." Her voice had a rough edge now, as if something in this was scraping against some memory of her own. Jack looked down at Mia. A curl of hair had fallen across her forehead. He brushed it back gently, careful not to wake her. He thought of all the nights he had counted the number of breaths Emily took lying beside her in the dim light, when the chemo had made her so tired she could barely move. Of all the times she had squeezed his fingers and said, "Breathe, Jack," when he was the one who started to hyperventilate. "I still do not feel like it is mine," he said. "Any of it." Allison's gaze softened. "It is not about feeling like you deserve it," she said. "It is about accepting what she entrusted to you." He did not answer. The words lay there, heavy and impossible, and somehow true all at once. Robert finally spoke again, his tone measured. "Mr. Miller, he said the numbers are not going anywhere in the next 10 minutes. We are not asking you to make decisions about the entire balance right now. All we need from you in this moment is acknowledgement that this account exists, and that you are the person named to receive it." Jack let out a long, uneven breath. "Acknowledgement," he repeated. "Yes," Robert said. "Can you do that much today?" Jack looked at the screen again, then at Emily's signature, then at his own name written in her hand. "I can admit that she set this up," he said quietly. "I can admit that she did it for me and Mia. That is as far as I can get right now." "That is far enough for this minute," Robert said. Allison rose from her crouch. She moved back to her chair and sat down. The distance between them, restored though something about it felt different now. Less like a barrier, more like a line drawn for balance. Mia snuffled in her sleep and pushed her face into Jack's chest. Her small fingers bunched in his shirt, wrinkling the fabric. He wrapped his free arm more securely around her. "I miss her," he said. The confession came out quietly, almost too soft to hear, but both Robert and Allison heard it. Allison's expression flickered. The control she wore so easily loosened a fraction. "I am sorry," she said, "for what it is worth." Robert nodded, his gaze steady. "So am I," he said. Jack nodded once in return. His eyes burned again, but he did not look away. He was tired of pretending he was not falling apart. The act had not saved her. It had only made him feel alone in the process. He let the tears gather without wiping them away. They did not change the numbers. They did not change the ink on the forms. They did not change the fact that the woman who had done this was gone. But they made it possible to breathe all the way in again. And when he let the air out, it did not hurt quite as much. Robert checked the time on his watch, then looked back at Jack. "We need to process some paperwork on our end," he said. "Verification, internal flags, that kind of thing. It will take a little while." Jack nodded, not really absorbing the specifics. Robert glanced at Mia, still soft and heavy in Jack's arms. "She has been very patient," he added. "There is a cafe on the first floor. Why do you not get something to eat, Mr. Miller? Give yourself a little space. When you come back, we can talk about what happens next in more precise terms." The thought of leaving the room made Jack uneasy. It felt like stepping away from something fragile that might disappear if he took his eyes off it. "If I go, this does not just vanish, right?" he asked. "You are not going to come back in here and find out it was all a typo." Allison answered, her voice calm. "No," she said. "The account is real. The balance is real. The documentation is real. We will just be making sure every internal box is checked, so no one questions that." Robert pushed his chair back. "And so, that when we do talk," he added, "we are talking about facts, not guesses." Jack looked down at Mia. Her mouth was slightly open, her small breaths puffing against his shirt. At the edges of her hairline, there was a faint line of sweat from sleeping so hard on him. His arm ached all the way into his shoulder. "She is going to wake up hungry," he said. Robert gave a small nod, as if that were the most important data point in the room. "Then that is reason enough," he said. Jack shifted, bracing his feet on the floor, and stood slowly. For a second his legs tingled, almost buckling, then held. Allison reached for something in a drawer and pulled out a slim folder. She slid it over to Robert, then turned back to Jack. "We will be here when you get back," she said. "Use the elevator you came up in. When you return, just tell the receptionist you need private banking. They will bring you back." Jack scraped the heel of his boot against the carpet, grounding himself in the simple friction. "Okay," he said quietly. He adjusted Mia until her arms were looped around his neck. Her head settled on his shoulder again with a trusting heaviness that always caught him. His hand brushed the card in his pocket. For a moment he considered taking it out, making sure it was still there, but he left it where it was. The knowledge of it felt like enough weight against his thigh. He followed Robert and Allison out of the room. At the hall they split. Robert turned toward another office. Allison paused at the intersection. "Mr. Miller," she said. He turned. She met his eyes. There was something in her gaze that had not been there before. Not pity. Something quieter. an acknowledgement. "Get something hot," she said, "for both of you." He gave a short nod. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up. The walls of brushed metal threw his reflection back at him from three sides. A man with red-rimmed eyes, hair pushed back by restless fingers, a child hanging on to him like he was the only stable structure in the world. Mia snuffled and muttered something unintelligible. He patted her back. When the door slid open into the main lobby, the sound swelled around him again. Conversations, footsteps on marble, the distant ring of a phone. It felt louder now, like walking into a room after being underwater. He followed the small signs near the wall pointing toward cafe. The cafe sat in a corner of the building, separated from the main lobby by another wall of glass. Inside, the floor was wood instead of stone. Simple tables, metal chairs with thin cushions, a counter lined with pastries under glass domes. Behind it, a barista worked the espresso machine, steam curling into the air. Jack stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Coffee strong and dark, sweetness from baked goods, the faint tang of orange peels in a trash can near the end of the counter. He joined the short line. Mia shifted again, rubbing her face against his neck. "Almost, kiddo," he murmured. She made a small sound that might have been agreement. When it was his turn, the woman behind the register looked up with a tired but genuine smile. "What can I get you?" she asked. Jack glanced at the chalkboard menu. The words swam for a second. Lattes, cold brew, mocha, breakfast sandwiches he could not quite afford even now out of habit. He focused. "A muffin," he said. "Blueberry if you have it. And a small milk. Do you have those little cartons?" "Sure do," she said, "for school field trips and overworked parents." He managed a huff of air that might have been a laugh. "And a black coffee," he added, "just regular." "Got it." She moved with easy efficiency, placing a blueberry muffin on a small plate, grabbing a milk carton from a cooler, pouring coffee into a paper cup. The warmth of the cup seeped into his fingers when she handed it over. "That will be $8.40, she said. $8.40. He reached for his wallet. When he opened it, the same tired bills stared back up at him. The $37 that had been an entire safety net last night looked smaller now, but the act of parting with them felt the same. He gave her a 10. She gave him change. "Good luck with your day," she said, not in the automatic way, but like she meant it. "Thanks," he said. "You too." He carried the tray to a table near the window. The chair squeaked when he pulled it out with his foot. He sat down, carefully shifting Mia so she was half curled in his lap instead of hanging on his shoulder. She blinked, eyelashes fluttering, then opened her eyes to narrow slits. "Daddy," she said, voice thick with sleep. "Hey," he said, "you are awake." She looked around, confused. "Where are we?" "In a cafe," he said, "inside the bank, like a tiny restaurant that only makes breakfast and coffee." Her eyes went to the plate, then to the milk carton. "Is that for me?" "Yeah," he said. "Blueberry, your favorite." A small smile edged onto her face. He set the plate closer to her and poked the straw into the top of the milk carton. "Careful," he said. "It might still be cold." She pinched off a piece of muffin and popped it into her mouth. Blueberry crumbs stuck to her fingers. She chewed slowly, savoring, then took a sip of milk. "This is good," she said. "Good," he said. He picked up his coffee and took a drink. It was too hot and too strong, and he did not care. The burn in his throat gave him something sharp and simple to focus on. A television mounted in the corner of the cafe caught his eye. The sound was low background noise under the clatter of cups and soft hum of conversations, but the moving images pulled his attention. On screen, a bright ballroom glittered under chandeliers. People in gowns and tuxedos stood at small tables, crystal glasses in their hands. A banner behind the podium read, "Lockwood Children's Foundation Annual Gala." A news ticker crawled along the bottom. Words flickered past. Record fundraising, pediatric oncology, life-saving research. The camera cut to a boy on stage no more than 10 in a small suit with a crooked bow tie. His hair was thick and messy. His cheeks were full and healthy. He grinned at someone off screen, missing one of his front teeth. Mia followed his gaze to the television. "Who is that?" she asked. "I do not know," Jack said. "Some kid. They are doing a story." The caption under the boy's image read, "Ethan Lockwood, transplant survivor." The word transplant jumped out at him. It felt different now, heavier. The boy waved awkwardly, then leaned into the microphone at the podium. The sound was too low for Jack to make out the words, but the boy's smile looked real, not camera-trained or stiff. Just a kid who was happy to be there under all those lights with all those eyes on him. Mia narrowed her eyes, studying the screen. "Mommy talked about a kid," she said, "a long time ago." Jack looked down at her. "What do you mean?" "She said she was a match," Mia said, as if she was repeating something she had stored away without understanding it at the time. She said there was a little boy who was really sick, and she got to help. She said that was a good day. The air in Jack's lungs turned thick again. He looked back at the screen. The boy's image had been replaced with footage of the Lockwood parents' all polished smiles and practiced gratitude. Then it cut back to him laughing as confetti fell around him in a previous year's clip. "Yeah," Jack said quietly. "I think I remember that." He had been in the doorway of their old apartment kitchen when Emily had said it, dropping her keys in the bowl on the counter, a bandage on her arm. He had kissed her forehead absently and asked if she was tired. She had said, "I am good." Today mattered. Then she had moved on to asking about his day, about how many trucks had come in late. He had not asked what being a match meant. He had not asked who the boy was. He had been relieved that her smile seemed real, and let it go at that. Mia took another bite of muffin, less precise now that she was more awake. Crumbs fell onto her pajama pants. "Is he better now?" she asked, nodding toward the screen. "I think so," Jack said. "He looks better." "Then Mommy did a good job," she said simply. Something squeezed tight behind his ribs. "Yeah," he said. "She did." He took another sip of coffee. It had cooled a little, but the bitterness was still there. Outside the glass wall of the cafe, rain streaked down the windows in long, clear lines. People hurried past on the sidewalk, with umbrellas, their reflections doubling in the wet pavement. Inside, the light was softer. Warm bulbs and metal shades hung over each table, casting small circles of gold on the wood. The world inside and the world outside felt separated by more than glass. Mia finished her muffin slowly, tearing it into small pieces, as if stretching the moment. When the plate was finally empty, she licked a bit of blueberry from her thumb and then leaned back against his chest with a small sigh. "Are we going home after this?" she asked. "Inambirsieged?" "Not yet," he said. "We have to talk to some people upstairs again." "About Mommy's card?" "Yeah," he said. "About that." She seemed to consider this, then nodded. "Okay," she said. "Can I bring my bear?" "You can bring your bear anywhere you want," he said. She smiled at that and reached for the stuffed animal, which had been slumped on the chair beside them. She hugged it tight, then rested her head under his chin. He wrapped his arm around her and let his hand rest on her small back. Her breathing slowed again, longer and more even now, not the heavy sleep of complete exhaustion, but the drowsy calm of a full stomach and a warm place to sit. Jack looked at the cooling coffee, the empty plate, the milk carton, the news on the television, the rain on the window. He let his eyes close for a moment, feeling the weight of his daughter, the distant echo of Emily's name, the presence of something enormous and incomprehensible sitting inside a system of numbers and laws and signatures. He was not ready to understand all of it. He was not sure he ever would be. Right now, in the quiet corner of a bank cafe, it was enough to sit to breathe without counting, and to keep his arms around the one thing in his life that still felt simple. When the coffee was gone and Mia's head had grown heavy against his chest again, Jack checked the wall clock above the cafe counter. The minute hand had crept farther than he expected. He brushed crumbs from her pajama leg and shifted her on his lap. "Ready to go back upstairs?" he asked. Mia nodded against his shirt, then yawned so wide her eyes watered. He stood joint stiff from sitting too long and carried the empty cup and plate to the bin. The barista at the counter caught his eye and lifted a hand in a small wave. He lifted his in return, more habit than thought. Outside the cafe, the lobby seemed a little less sharp than before. The bright light, the glossy stone, the people in suits, all of it had not changed, but something in him had. A fraction. Enough to keep his feet moving. He crossed to the bank of elevators and pressed the button. When the doors opened, he stepped inside with Mia on his hip and watched his reflection come together again in the brushed metal. Same tired man, same child in his arms. The only difference was what sat in his pocket and in the files on a screen upstairs. On the private banking floor, a receptionist with a sleek headset looked up as he approached. "Can I help you, sir?" "Jack Miller," he said. "I was in a room earlier with Allison and Robert. They told me to come back up." Recognition smoothed the lines on her forehead. "Of course," she said. "They are expecting you." She pressed a button on her phone. "Mr. Chang, Mr. Miller is back on the floor." A pause. "Yes, I will send him in." She stood and came around the desk. "If you follow me," she said. The hallway looked the same as before. The carpet still swallowed sound. The walls still held framed photos of mountain lakes and city lights. It felt different anyway, walking it a second time. The first time he had been a man with a question. Now he was a man with a question and a number lodged in his brain like a stone. The receptionist opened the same door as earlier and stepped aside. Inside, Robert sat at the table, a neat stack of papers in front of him. Allison was beside him, a tablet in hand, stylus resting between her fingers. She looked up as Jack entered. There was a small nod that passed between them, not quite a greeting more than acknowledgement. Mr. Miller, Robert said. Come in, have a seat. Jack eased into the chair again, settling Mia across his lap. She was more awake now, watching the room with a quiet, wary curiosity. Her bear sat tucked under her arm like a co-pilot. Allison tapped something on her tablet, then set it down. We have finished our internal checks, she said. The account is verified. The trust documents have been confirmed. The balance is, as you saw it. Jack let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. So it is not going to vanish, he said. No, Robert said. It is not going to vanish. It is, however, subject to whatever you decide to do with it. That is where the work comes in. Jack glanced at the stack of papers. That looks like a lot of work, he said. Robert smiled faintly. We will take it one step at a time, he said. Right now I wanted to focus on two things. First, your immediate needs. Second, making sure you are not dropped into the deep end without a life jacket. Deep end, Jack repeated. That sounds about right. Robert folded his hands. You mentioned an eviction notice, he said. Downstairs. Yeah, Jack said. His cheeks warmed. On the door when I came home last night. I am behind on rent. 3 weeks. They want it all plus fees in 5 days, or they throw us out. How much, Allison asked. He hesitated, the number suddenly feeling small and stupid in the same room as $80 million balances. $2,950, he said, plus whatever late charge they tack on. I do not know the exact fee. They like to surprise you. Allison picked up the stylus and wrote something on the tablet. We will round that to $3,500 to cover any fees, she said. Jack blinked. You can just do that, he said. Yes, she said. Once we have your authorization, we can wire the funds directly to your landlord's account or issue a cashier's check depending on what they accept. Either way, that notice stops being a threat. The idea of that piece of red paper losing its power made his breath catch. Okay, he said, that would help. Robert nodded. Good, he said. Beyond the rent, what other immediate pressures are you under? Utilities, food, anything else that is in danger of being shut off or that cannot wait a month? Jack thought of the electric bill with the pink strip across the top, the gas company envelope he had left unopened on the counter, the broken heater that had been limping along through space heaters and extra blankets. The power bill is behind, he said. Gas too, probably. I have not opened it yet. The heater in the apartment barely works. Groceries are well thin. I have been skipping meals so she can eat. He nodded at Mia. Mia looked up at him with a small frown. You did not have dinner last night, she said. He gave her a tight smile. I was not hungry, he said. She squinted at him. Even at 3, she knew that was a lie. She did not press it. Allison wrote more notes. The stylus moved quickly. All right, she said. Here is what I recommend for the very short term. We establish a personal checking account in your name linked to this internal relationship. We move a set amount of money into it, not the full balance, but enough to cover your living expenses for a while and give you room to breathe. There was that word again. How much is a set amount, he asked. For most clients in your situation, starting around $50,000 in a checking account is reasonable, she said. That covers several months of bills, food, some repairs, and a margin for unexpected costs. The rest stays in protected accounts that we can talk about once you are not standing on a cliff. 50,000, he repeated. He tried to picture that much in cash. The image would not settle. His mind kept slipping back to the 10 he had handed over at the cafe. That is a lot of money to just have sitting there, he said. It is less than 0.1% of your total balance, she said. From the perspective of the trust, it is conservative. He let out a low breath. When you say it like that, he said, I feel like I am doing something wrong even thinking it is a lot. There is no wrong in recognizing scale, Robert said. You have lived at one scale. This situation exists at another. It takes time for the inside of your head to catch up to the numbers on the screen. Mia swung her legs softly, the toes of her sock brushing his knee. Will that mean we can buy cereal whenever we want? She asked. Jack laughed, the sound sudden and real. Yeah, he said, I think it means that. She nodded satisfied and went back to picking at a loose thread on her bear's ear. Robert opened a folder from the stack and slid a few pages toward Jack. These are basic account forms, he said. Name, address, identification, that sort of thing. We can fill in some of it for you from what we already have, but we will need your signature, several times. Jack picked up the top page. The print seemed to crowd the paper, but the fields themselves were simple enough. Name, social security number, current address, the one with the peeling paint and the red notice on the door. As he read, his pulse slowed from a hammer to something closer to a steady knock. I want to be clear about something Robert said. You are under no obligation to make any long-term financial decisions today. We are not selling you investment products in this meeting. Our priority is to stabilize your situation. Then we can bring in a wealth advisor, and if you choose an attorney to help you build a plan that fits who you are, not who people think you should be now that there are commas in your life. Jack looked up. You keep saying we, he said. Yes, Robert said. The bank has resources. People whose entire job is to understand this world, so that people like you do not have to become experts overnight. You will have choices. You will be the one making them. We are here to give you information and guardrails. Guardrails, Jack said, like on a highway. Exactly, Robert said. They do not drive the car for you. They just keep you from going off the edge if you drift. Allison watched Jack's face as Robert spoke. There was something like approval in her eyes when he nodded slowly. Okay, Jack said. I am willing to listen. I do not want to mess this up. For Mia. His daughter looked up at her name. I like cereal, she said again, as if that was the central point. That can be part of the plan, Allison said, a small smile touching her mouth. Jack set the form back down. So, we pay the rent, he said. We pay the bills. We put some money in a checking account, so I am not counting pennies every time I go to the grocery store. And we leave the rest where it is until I know enough not to do something stupid with it. Broadly, yes, Robert said. It is like getting oxygen first, Allison added. The plane masks. You secure your own, then you help the person next to you. You are not making decisions about where the flight is going while you cannot breathe. The metaphor landed with an almost physical weight. Jack thought of how many times Emily had told him to breathe. It seemed the whole world had decided to repeat it. Okay, he said again. The word felt more solid this time. Tell me where to sign. Allison picked up a pen and slid it across the table. We will go through each document one by one, she said. I will explain what it is in normal language. If something does not make sense, you ask. There are no dumb questions in a room like this, Mr. Miller, only unasked ones. He took the pen. It felt strange in his hand, heavier than the ones he used to fill out delivery logs. Mia leaned back against him. I can draw too, she said, if you have paper. Allison pulled a blank sheet from the back of the folder and placed it in front of Mia. For you, she said, you can make something while your dad signs his name 1,000,000 times. 1,000,000, Jack said. That feels about right. He bent over the first form as Allison began to walk him through it, line by line. The words were still dense, but each sentence she spoke chipped away at the feeling of being completely lost. For the first time since he walked through the glass doors downstairs, Jack felt something other than fear or shock stirring underneath his exhaustion. It was small and fragile and did not have a name yet, but it sat in his chest beside the ache and did not move away. By the third form, Jack's signature had started to lose its shape. The J was still there, looping up and back, but the rest of the letters sagged together in a rushed line. His hand cramped between the thumb and index finger. He flexed it once, heard the faint pop of a joint, then lowered the pen again. Name here, Allison said, tapping the bottom of the page. This one confirms the opening of your personal checking account attached to the internal relationship. It just says you understand the basic terms. No hidden traps. He signed. The pen scraped softly on the paper. Mia hummed under her breath as she drew. She had propped the blank sheet on the edge of the table, her bear wedged between her stomach and the chair, to keep it from sliding. What are you working on? Robert asked her, his tone shifting to something lighter. Secret, she said. He put a hand dramatically over his heart. Fair enough, he said. Jack almost smiled. Allison slid another document forward. This one authorizes the transfer of funds from the internal account into the new checking account, she said. $50,000 as discussed. It also allows us to execute that rent payment on your behalf. The number looked strange typed out on a single line. 50,000. Not in a headline, not in an ad. On a form with his name above it. Jack cleared his throat. Can I see it before it goes out? He asked. The rent thing. Just to make sure it says what it is supposed to. Yes, Allison said. We will show you the wire confirmation before we finalize it. He nodded and signed. They worked their way through the stack that way. Allison named each document, explained what it did and what it did not do. Jack asked questions when the words slid into jargon. What does indemnify mean? He asked at one point. It means you agree not to sue us for doing the thing you are asking us to do, as long as we actually do it the way we are supposed to, Allison said. That seems reasonable, he said. Sometimes it is, she answered. Robert occasionally clarified a point with a shorter version, a simpler analogy, a story about another client stripped of identifying details. They were careful not to throw too much information at him at once. Outside the room, the day went on. Footsteps in the hall doors opening and closing, the distant ring of a phone at the receptionist's desk. The world continued to spin while Jax narrowed down to ink and paper and the steady weight of his daughter on his lap. Mia's drawing took shape slowly. At first it was just lines long and crooked stretching across the page. Then she added rectangles. A peaked triangle on top of one rectangle, a door. 3 little square windows, each with a cross inside to mark panes. Windows, she said to herself. She added a tree next. The trunk was a straight brown line. The leaves were a burst of green scribbles. She asked Allison for another color. Allison dug in the desk drawer and produced a blue pen. Good as it gets, she said. Thank you, Mia said solemn. She drew a blue strip across the top of the page. A sky. Then a yellow circle in one corner, with lines radiating from it like eyelashes. Son, she announced. Jack signed his name at the bottom of a form labeled Beneficiary Designation. His hand shook a little on that one. This one, Allison said, just confirms that your daughter is your primary beneficiary on the accounts you are opening today. If anything happens to you, the assets move to her trust. We will talk about the trust structure later. For now, you are just naming her. So, this is me putting her in that box, Jack said, nodding at the line where Emily had written his name years earlier. The way Emily put me in hers. In a sense, Robert said. Yes. That thought sat in him as he signed a circular comfort and a fresh ache at the same time. He set the pen down and flexed his fingers again. The pad of his index finger was starting to feel numb. Almost there, Allison said. Then we can let you escape the paperwork minefield for a while. Mia sat up a little straighter. I am done, she announced. She slid her drawing across the table with both hands careful not to smudge the ink. Jack looked down. A house stood in the center of the page. It had a door with a knob and 2 small steps leading up to it, a square window on each side. Smoke curled from a narrow chimney drawn in gray pen Allison must have found somewhere. In front of the house, 3 stick figures held hands. One tall one, medium one, small. Each had a simple half circle for a smile. The smallest one had lines sticking out from her head where Mia had tried to show pigtails. This is you, Mia said, pointing to the tallest figure. This is me, she pointed to the smallest. And this is Mommy. She tapped the medium figure between them. It had a little scribble above its head, meant to be hair in a messy bun. Jack's breath caught. You put her there, he said. Of course, Mia said. She looked mildly offended. It is our house. What is that behind the house? Robert asked, pointing to a small rectangle Mia had drawn off to the side. A swing, she said. So I can swing so high I can see the sky. Allison looked at the drawing quietly for a moment. You did that very fast, she said. It is not fast, Mia said. I do not like rushing houses. Jack swallowed. His eyes burned again. He blinked until the lines of the drawing sharpened. It is beautiful, he said. Thank you. Mia beamed and pulled the paper closer again. It is for all of us, she said. You cannot fold it. I will not fold it, he said. He placed the drawing gently to the side away from the neat stacks of legal paper. Allison gathered the forms he had already signed and straightened them with a quick tap on the table. The stack looked less intimidating now, like something completed instead of something looming. Okay, she said. We are set for the initial account openings. I am going to put these through the system. That will activate your checking account and attach it to the internal relationship. Once that is done, we can initiate the rent payment. She turned to her keyboard, hands moving with a speed that came from habit. Screens changed. Status bars moved from left to right. She read off numbers under her breath that meant nothing to Jack, but seemed to matter to whatever invisible mechanism held the bank together. Robert opened another thin folder already labeled with Jack's name. This is your copy of everything you just signed, he said. We will send a digital copy as well if you would like, but I prefer clients have something physical they can flip through at home when the day settles. Sure, Jack said. Paper is fine. He did not own a printer. One more thing he had gotten used to doing without. Allison finished her flurry of typing and looked up. All right, she said. Your checking account is active. Here are the last 4 digits so you recognize it when you see it. She slid a small summary page toward him, where a line of numbers stared back under the words New Account. He picked it up, feeling the texture of the paper, the slight indent of the ink. Now, she said, let us take care of the rent. She pulled up another screen, this one, a wire request form. I will need your landlord's name and either their bank information or an address where we can send a cashier's check, she said. If you have a copy of your lease, that would help. I have a photo of it on my phone, Jack said. The leasing office emailed it. I did not print it. That works, she said. He fished his phone out with his free hand, scrolled through old emails until he found the lease. The header from the property management company looked accusatory now, though he knew that was in his head. He read off the details: name, bank, routing number. Allison entered them carefully, double-checking each digit. She turned the screen slightly toward him. "That is the name and amount we are sending," she said. $3,500. Please confirm this looks right." He read it. The landlord's name looked strangely formal on the screen. The amount made his chest tighten, not with fear but with something that felt like release. "It looks right," he said. "Okay," she said. "I am going to submit this as a same-day wire. It will hit their account within a few hours at most. You may still want to call them later, let them know it is coming. Sometimes property managers are slow to check their systems." He nodded. The idea of calling the office and telling them the money was on its way felt surreal. Allison clicked the final button. A small confirmation box popped up. She saved a copy and printed a sheet. She handed it to him with a small, decisive motion. "Here," she said, "proof that this part is handled." He took it. The paper was warm from the printer. At the bottom, the word "confirmed" sat in clean black text. Handled. He let the word sink in. Robert leaned back slightly. "How are you doing?" he asked. On a scale from 1 to completely overwhelmed. Jack huffed out a breath. "Somewhere around 9, he said. "But I was at 12 when I walked in, so that feels like improvement." Robert smiled. "That counts," he said. Allison gathered the remaining loose pages and filed them into the folder with his name. "Mr. Miller," she said. He looked up. Her hands were flat on the table, palms down. Her shoulders, usually held in a straight professional line, had dropped a fraction. "I want to say something before we move on," she said. He waited. "When you walked into the lobby today," she said, "I saw your jacket, your boots, your daughter in pajamas. I saw the way you looked at the floors. And then I saw the card and the internal flag and a very large number, and I made some assumptions." Her cheeks colored slightly as she spoke. "I thought you were either playing a game you did not understand or trying to get something that was not yours," she said. "I was wrong. Completely." Jack shifted in his chair. The admission was more disarming than any coldness had been. "I would have thought the same thing," he said. "If I was sitting where you were." "That does not make it better," she said. "It just makes it common. I do not like being common in that way." She glanced at Mia, who was busy drawing a second picture of what looked like a lopsided cat. "Your wife did something extraordinary long before she ever became a client of this bank," Allison said. "She chose to give, and she chose to keep quiet about it, and she chose to trust that this place would take care of you and your daughter when she could not. I should have treated that trust with more respect from the beginning." Jack looked at her. For the first time he saw not just the sharp suit and the polished tone, but the human under the layers. Someone who spent her days watching numbers move and sometimes forgot there were people attached to them. "Thank you for saying that," he said. "Seriously." She nodded once. "It matters to me," she said, "that you know I see the difference." An odd kind of peace settled over the table for a moment. The accounts were still strange. The money was still terrifying. Emily was still gone. None of that changed. But something in how he sat in the chair did. His back straightened a little. The space did not feel as hostile. Mia looked up from her cat. "Daddy," she said, "can we go to the park sometime?" He looked down at her. "Yeah," he said, "we can go to the park." Allison watched the exchange, then closed the folder with a quiet click. "For today," she said, "we have done enough." Jack looked at the stack of papers at the drawing of the house with 3 figures in front at the wire confirmation in his hand. For the first time, the phrase "enough" did not sound like a limit. It sounded like a beginning. When they finally stepped out of private banking, the light in the hallway had shifted. It was still the same muted glow from recessed fixtures, but it felt warmer somehow, less like the inside of a machine, and more like a passage that led somewhere they were allowed to go. The receptionist stood as they approached. "All set?" she asked. "I think so," Jack said. She smiled. "Mr. Chang asked me to give you this," she said. She handed him a small envelope with the Sterling Gate logo in the corner. Inside, he felt the shape of plastic and a thin sheet of paper. "Your new debit card," she said. "It will be active as of tomorrow morning. The summary has your account information, and if you have any questions before then, there is a number on the back." "Thank you," he said. "Have a good rest of your day, Mr. Miller," she said. She glanced at Mia. "You too." Mia waved, her fingers still smudged with ink from the drawings. The elevator doors slid open. This time, as the 3 walls of brushed metal closed around them, Jack did not feel like he was being swallowed. His reflection still looked tired eyes rimmed with red, but his shoulders sat differently, less hunched, more centered. "It is shiny," Mia said, touching her own reflection with one small fingertip. "Yeah," Jack said, "shiny. The elevator hummed softly as it descended. He listened to the numbers light up above the door. 10, 9, 8. Each one a marker between the place where his life had cracked open and the floor where the rest of the world went on without knowing. The doors opened onto the main lobby. The marble gleamed under the overhead lights. The chandelier above scattered the gray daylight into points of brightness. This time, walking through the space, he did not hug the wall. He crossed the center of the lobby with Mia on his hip and the envelope in his hand. A man in a pale suit glanced up from his phone as they passed. His gaze moved over. Jack lingered for a second on Mia's pajamas, then moved on. No sharp judgment, just curiosity. At the information desk, Carmen was finishing with another customer. She caught sight of Jack and lifted a hand. "Mr. Miller," she called softly. He walked over. "How did it go?" she asked. He searched for a word and found none that fit. "Complicated," he said at last, "but, better than I thought." She studied his face for a second, then nodded like that answer told her enough. "I am glad," she said. "I hoped you would not regret coming in." He thought of the red notice of the hollow refrigerator, of the way he had almost thrown the card back in the drawer. "I do not," he said. She smiled, real and unguarded. "Good," she said. "You two take care of yourselves, okay?" "We will try," he said. Mia held up her drawing of the house with the 3 figures. "Look," she said, "I made this." Carmen leaned over the counter to see it. "That is beautiful," she said. "You are a good artist." Mia straightened a little with pride. "Thank you," she said. They left the bank through the same glass doors they had entered earlier. Outside, the rain had eased to a fine mist. The air smelled of wet concrete and car exhaust and the faint sweetness from a nearby food cart setting up for the lunch crowd. Jack paused just beyond the doors. The bank's facade was all glass and steel, rising several stories into the low clouds. In its reflective surface, he saw himself again. A man in a worn jacket, a child on his hip, an envelope held tight in one hand. The image was the same as it would have been that morning, yet it felt different. "Daddy," Mia said into his neck, "can we get chicken nuggets?" He let out a small laugh that surprised him with how easily it came. "Yeah," he said, "we can get chicken nuggets." "Really?" She pulled back enough to look at his face. Like actually, he said. Her grin spread across her whole face. He shifted her weight and started down the sidewalk. The bus stop sat at the corner, the familiar green sign slightly tilted. A few people were already waiting, collars turned up against the damp air. The ground was slick, but his footing was sure. Traffic moved in steady lines, tires hissing on the wet street. A delivery truck idled at the curb, the driver checking his manifest. Somewhere above, a gull cried the sound sharp and distant. Jack stepped up to the bus stop and adjusted his hold on Mia so she could stand for a moment. She slid down his side and planted her feet on the concrete, gripping his jacket to steady herself. "I want that bus," she said, pointing as a vehicle approached. "That one is going the wrong way," he said. "We need the one that goes back toward home." "How do you know?" she asked. He pointed to the sign on the front. "Different numbers," he said. She nodded as if this were an acceptable explanation. While they waited, he opened the small envelope from the bank. Inside was a plain white card with the bank's logo and a string of numbers. Under it, his name. The actual debit card still attached to the paper looked almost identical to the one Emily had given him, just newer, less worn, less scratched. He ran his thumb over the raised letters. This one said Jack Miller. He slid it back into the envelope and tucked it into his jacket. The feel of it there next to the old card was strange and solid at the same time. The bus they needed arrived with a soft squeal of brakes. The doors folded open. Warm, slightly stale air rushed out, carrying the smell of worn vinyl seats and faint spilled coffee. Jack picked Mia up again and climbed the steps. The driver, a man with graying hair and a reflective vest, glanced at them. "Back again," he said, recognizing them from earlier. "Yeah," Jack said. "You do what you needed to do?" the driver asked. "Some of it," Jack said. "Enough for today." The driver nodded. "Good," he said. Jack swiped his transit card and moved down the aisle to an empty pair of seats. He sat by the window and set Mia beside him. Her legs swung above the floor, too short to reach. She pressed her nose to the glass, watching the city blur as the bus pulled away from the curb. They passed the bank, then the tall office buildings, then the smaller storefronts with neon signs and chalkboard menus. People hurried along the sidewalks with umbrellas tilted at precise angles. Mia traced a finger on the fogged corner of the window. "I drew our house," she said, not looking away from the changing street. "The one we are going to have." "Yeah," Jack said softly. "I saw." "It has a swing," she said, "so you can push me." "I will push you," he said. He watched their reflections in the window as the city slid by. His face and hers, layered over the passing buildings, doubled and ghost-like. The world outside continued at its same pace, no faster or slower for what had changed inside his jacket pocket. Mia leaned her head against his arm. "Are we still poor?" she asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. "Why do you ask that?" he said. "Because you said we could not get nuggets before," she said. "And you said we had to count money." He thought about the number on the screen, the forms, the wire. He thought about the way his stomach had clenched at the price of a muffin that morning. "We will not have to count every coin the same way now," he said slowly. "We have some help. From Mommy and from some people at the bank. Things are going to be different. Not all at once, but different." She nodded against his sleeve, taking that as enough. "Okay," she said. "Can I still have nuggets, though?" "Yes," he said. "You can still have nuggets." She smiled at the window. He let his head rest lightly against the cool glass. The vibration of the bus hummed through his skull. His eyelids felt heavy, but he kept them open, watching the familiar streets as they approached their neighborhood. The tall buildings faded into lower ones. The polished storefronts gave way to convenience stores with faded signs and laundromats with fogged windows. The sidewalks here were cracked weeds pushing through in narrow seams. The bus slowed at their stop. Jack stood lifting Mia onto his hip again. They stepped down onto the sidewalk. The doors hissed shut behind them, and the bus pulled away, engine deep and low. For a moment, he just stood there, feeling the shift from the moving vehicle to solid ground. The sky was still a dull gray, but the mist had thinned. A weak patch of light filtered through the clouds, not enough to cast shadows, but enough to soften the edges of the buildings. "Home?" Mia asked. "Yeah," he said. "Home first, then nuggets." She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder again. He adjusted his grip and started down the cracked sidewalk toward their building, the envelope in his pocket and the weight of his daughter in his arms, each anchoring him in a different way as he walked. The building looked the same as when he had left it. 3 stories of chipped brick, rust streaks under the windows, a hand-painted "No Loitering" sign nailed crooked near the entrance. The front door stuck for a second when he pulled it, then gave with a shudder and a groan, as if the frame itself was tired. Inside, the hallway smelled like it always did. Old smoke soaked into the walls, someone's curry from lunch, the faint musk of damp carpet. The light at the far end flickered, buzzing in an uneven rhythm. Mia lifted her head from his shoulder. "It is dark," she whispered. "It is just the hallway," he said. "We are almost at our door." Their unit sat halfway down the corridor. The hinges squeaked when the wind hit them right. The paint had been beige at some point now. It was some shade between gray and nothing. The red eviction notice was still taped to the center. It had not moved. No one had come by to peel it off, to write anything new over it. It waited stern and noisy against the dull door. Mia pointed. "It is still there," she said. "Yeah," Jack said. "It is." He shifted her to one hip and reached into his pocket with his free hand. His fingers brushed the envelope from the bank, the edge of his wallet, the familiar shape of Emily's old card. He closed his hand around the keys instead. The lock stuck for a heartbeat, then turned. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment air greeted him with its own mixed smells. Old coffee in the sink, laundry detergent that had never fully rinsed from a towel draped over a chair. The faint hint of the lavender spray Emily had liked clinging in places he could never quite pin down. He set Mia on the couch. The cushions sank under her weight. She sat for a second, then flopped sideways, arms spread, hair fanning out on the fabric. "Home," she said softly. "Home," he echoed. The room looked smaller than it had this morning, but not because anything had changed. The sagging couch, the second-hand lamp with the crooked shade, the thrift store TV stand with a missing knob, all of it was exactly as he had left it. He crossed to the door and ran his fingers along the edge of the red notice. The paper crinkled under his touch. "You are not the boss anymore," he murmured under his breath. He did not take it down. Not yet. He liked the idea of calling the landlord with the confirmation number in his hand, of hearing the surprise in their voice when the money landed. That could wait until morning. His arm ached a low, insistent throb from carrying Mia all day. He rolled his shoulder once, working out the tightness, then went to the small window over the table and pulled the blinds open. Gray light filtered in. The view was a narrow alley, a brick wall, a strip of sky. A fire escape ran crookedly up the side of the neighboring building. Someone had hung a bright blue towel over one of its rails. It fluttered in the thin breeze, a small scrap of color against all the concrete. Mia sat up on the couch. "Can we have nuggets now?" she asked. He looked over at her. She was still in her star pajamas. There was a smear of blueberry near her collar and a smudge of ink on her cheek from where she had rubbed her face while drawing. "Yeah," he said. "We can." He went to the kitchen, opened the freezer. Inside, tucked behind a bag of ice burned peas, sat a half-empty bag of chicken nuggets he had been spacing out, counting one by one on nights when he was not sure there would be more. He took it out and poured the remaining pieces onto a baking sheet. They clattered softly against the metal. He turned the oven on, listening for the click and whoosh that meant the gas had caught. When he closed the oven door, he leaned against the counter for a second, palms pressed to the cool laminate. The weight in his pocket pressed against his hip. He slid his hand in and pulled out the envelope from Sterling Gate. He opened it carefully. The new debit card slid into his palm, smooth and untouched. His name caught the light in clean raised letters. He set it on the counter and dug deeper into his pocket for the other one. The old card emerged, edges dulled, silver logo worn down to a ghost. The numbers still there under his thumb. The plastic slightly warped from years of being carried and never used. He held both cards next to each other. One from a system that had barely known his name until today, one from hands that had held his face while he slept in a hospital chair. He set the new card down beside the stove. It would have its place soon enough. The old one stayed in his hand. He walked back into the living room and toward the small table by the window. The top was scratched. A ring from a long-forgotten coffee cup stained one corner. He pulled open the narrow drawer. Inside lay a small collection of things that mattered in ways no ledger could track. A concert ticket stub from the night he and Emily had decided they were more than friends. A receipt from the diner where they had argued about baby names and laughed until the waitress had told them they were scaring the other customers. A photograph of Emily on some windblown beach hair, pulled back sunglasses, crooked, laughing at something he had said back when the horizon had felt wide. He picked up the photo. In it, her smile was wide and real eyes crinkled at the corners. The sky behind her was a clear blue he could hardly remember seeing in person. "I forgot this day," he said quietly to the empty room. "I do not know how I could, but I did." He set the picture back into the drawer, propping it up against the side, so her face looked out instead of up. Then he laid the old card beside it. For a long second he simply looked at them both. "This is yours," he said, barely audible. "You did this. Not the numbers, not the bank. You." Mia's voice carried from the couch. "Daddy," she called. "Are they ready?" "Almost," he said. "Few more minutes." He closed the drawer gently, leaving the photo and the card lined up inside Emily's smile, and the plastic she had pressed into his hand in the hospital sitting together in the dark wood. In the kitchen, the oven ticked softly as it heated. The faint smell of warming metal filled the air. He checked the nuggets, turned them, once slid the tray back in. When he came back into the living room, Mia had curled onto her side knees, tucked up watching the TV screen, even though he had not turned it on. The house drawing sat on the coffee table in front of her, weighted by her bear. "You did not fold it," she said. "I promised I would not," he answered. She reached out and tapped the tiny scribbled figure in the middle of the three. "Mommy likes the house," she said with certainty. "Yeah," he said. "She does." He sat down on the edge of the couch and let himself sink back into the cushion. His body sagged into the familiar sag of the springs. The ache in his muscles settled into a dull hum. Mia scooted closer until her shoulder touched his hip. "Are we going to live in that house?" she asked, looking at the drawing. He followed her gaze. The house with the door and the little steps, the tree, the swing, the sun in the corner of the page-yellow rays reaching out past the roof. "One day," he said, "I think we will find it." She seemed to accept that. She leaned her head against his leg. The timer on the stove beeped, not loud, just a small chirp. He got up, pulled the tray from the oven and set it on the stove top. The heat curled up in waves. The nuggets hissed quietly, oil still popping on their surfaces. He arranged them on a plate and carried it to the coffee table, setting it beside the drawing. "Careful," he said. "They are hot." Mia pushed herself up and sat cross-legged. She blew on the first nugget, then took a small bite. The crust crunched. Grease shone on her bottom lip. Her shoulders relaxed. "This is the best," she said around the mouthful. He sat beside her, with his own piece, held it for a second, without eating. His chest felt tight again, but not from panic. He looked around the little room. The stains on the carpet, the crack in the ceiling that ran like a thin river from one corner to the other, the mismatched chairs, the blanket draped over the back of the couch that had once been Emily's favorite because it was ugly in a charming way. For the first time, none of those things registered as evidence of failure. They were just pieces of a place that had held them through their worst nights. He ate the nugget. It tasted like processed chicken and childhood. When the plate was empty and Mia had licked her fingers, she slumped sideways into his lap again. Her eyes drifted half-closed. "Daddy," she murmured, "do you think Mommy can see us?" He let his hand rest on her back, feeling the small rise and fall. "I do not know," he said. "Maybe." "I think she can," Mia said. "She said you are strong." The words pulled his throat tight. When did she say that, he asked. When she tucked me in, Mia said as if it were obvious. She said, "Your dad is strong. He will take care of you. He just forgets sometimes." He closed his eyes. He could see Emily sitting on the edge of their daughter's bed, one hand smoothing the blanket, the other tucking hair behind a small ear. He could hear the smile in her voice as she teased him in front of their child, framing his fear as forgetfulness instead of weakness. "I do forget," he said quietly. "About what Mia asked." "How strong I am," he said. She made a sleepy sound that might have been agreement. He bent his head and pressed his lips to the top of her hair. She smelled like oven heat and blueberry and the faint hospital soap that never seemed to fully wash out of her pajamas. "Hey, Em," he said in his head, the words more thought than sound. "I am trying." The light from the window was thinning. The gray outside edged toward blue. In the alley, the blue towel on the fire escape still moved in the light breeze, a small flag of color across from their window. He would call the landlord in the morning. He would talk to whoever Robert recommended. He would pick up the new card when it was ready and put it in his wallet, where the old one had lived for months without being understood. Tonight he stayed on the couch. He drew the blanket over Mia and over his own legs. She burrowed closer, hand bunched in his shirt. He kept one arm around her, the other resting on the cushion, where if he reached forward a few inches, he could touch the corner of her drawing. The house, the tree, the three figures standing hand in hand. He breathed in slowly through his nose, held it for a count, let it out through his mouth. The air moved all the way down for the first time in longer than he could remember. "Thank you, Emily," he said, the words barely audible, meant for the photo in the drawer, for the woman in his memory, for the signature on the screen upstairs. "I will not waste this. I do not know how yet, but I will not waste it." Mia's breathing evened out. Her weight grew heavier in sleep. Outside, the sky dimmed another shade. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor's TV flicked on the sound muffled through the wall. A car door slammed out on the street. Life went on as it had that morning. In the small apartment on the sagging couch, Jack sat with his daughter tucked against him. His eyes open in the gathering dark, listening to her breathe and letting himself believe for the first time in a long while that staying was not the same thing as being stuck. He did not know what the future would look like. He did not know how many more forms he would have to sign or how many times he would have to repeat his name to strangers in suits. He knew he would wake up tomorrow in the same apartment. He knew he would call the landlord. He knew there was a card in a drawer by the window that had already changed everything. For now he tightened his arm around Mia, drew one more slow breath, and let his eyes close, the image of the little drawn house and the three stick figures imprinted behind his lids as the day finally gently let go. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.